Hey everybody, happy Sunday. It is Kit here, and welcome to a bit of a special um brain. Hi, can we work today? Crochet video, there we go. So I'm going to be doing a voiceover reading, kind of going back to our little crochet vlog things. Um And part of that is because, like, slowly but surely, I'm just tired right now, but I want to put out a bit of a crochet thing. Also because it's motivation. And what I'm currently working on is the sleeping bag from hell. But I finally got the main piece done. However, that's not what is on screen. What is on screen is I'm making a fingerless glove, 2 hats, and scarf set for a friend's Christmas back in Tennessee, and I meant to get it done over the break. I didn't want to crochet crap over the break, so this is motivation for that. This is me giving myself a kick in the pants on multiple levels. The purple in the piece that I'm currently working on that you'll probably be seeing throughout, um, I'm going to use some of that purple for the sleeping bag because there's a few components to it. So there's like the backing, which is going to be the big main piece. I'll show this on video probably in a week or two. And then I'm going to have the actual part that, is the shorter part of the sleeping bag. And then I'm going to attach a pillow and like make a little white bow and sew that onto the corner of the pillow. I'm going to stuff the pillow a little bit. So, and then kind of put it all like together. Yeah. But I'm going to use that purple. I'm going to use a lighter lilac type purple, and then just the bow will be like a white. So think that'll work, but I also bought this purple for the scarf and all of that, so I need to get started on it just to make sure that, okay, I don't need to go get more yarn. Because if I'm going to be out of that purple, then I'm not using it for the sleeping bag, because that's a just whatever I have thing. So, yeah, this video is a kick in the pants for me to actually do that. So that's what I'm going to be doing. As for what the voiceover part is and the reading part, I need to get back to writing. I've been missing it. I need to get back to it. And it's just really hard for me right now, and I don't know why. And I need to sit down and I need to read a chapter and get reconnected with my characters and the story, and I need to really read the entire thing that I've got going so far. But I'm hoping my thoughts are if I read the last full chapter with Valerie, um, then that'll make me want to. And also, I'm sharing a little bit, which we all know that is an ongoing journey for me. And it will make me also feel more connected and actually get freaking chapter 14 off the freaking ground. I don't really want to do anything right now in life because I'm going back to Tennessee on Wednesday or Thursday, and I really don't want to. I'm not ready, and that's making things really hard. So, we're fighting through that one step at a time. Anyways, yeah, I'm just gonna jump in. This is my current work in progress, which is debt. I've shared snippets last year on Twitter. I haven't shared in a little while because honestly, it just fell off to the side because school, work, lack of motivation, exhaustion. You can just put all sorts of names on it. Lots of different things. Uh, it is chapter 12. I am currently on writing chapter 14. The reason we're reading chapter 12 is because chapter 13 changes to the other main character and their point of view. But then it goes back to the character at hand, Valerie, in chapter 14. So her last chapter was in chapter 12. Hence why I'm reading chapter 12. Because chapter 14 is like right after chapter 12 from her point of view, if that makes sense. Yeah, she's not having a good time. It's basically like 160 pages in, and this is all leading up to a very penultimate moment in Valerie's life. It's when she's deciding. And when I say this, it's chapter 12, chapter 14. This period, this moment of the book, of her story, is when she stops fighting certain things and she starts figuring out that kind of she was lied to. Um, and that things that she was told as a child are not what they were seeing, not what they seemed. But of course, she was a child and she believed her family and her friends and the people, the adults in her life. She believed them. Um, and she's starting to make decisions for herself, but it's also terrifying because, well, it's scary. It's scary doing the unknown, and she's not having a very good time right now. So she's feeling backed into a corner. She's got choices. They suck, but she still has choices, and it's difficult. So anyway, for whatever this ends up being, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope I get a lot done on the project. So anyway, chapter 12, who to be. Why am I nervous? Why am I terrified to do this suddenly? Okay. I've done this a million. I've done this. I've done this before. You will do this. Oh shit. Okay. Apparently I need more exposure therapy. Okay. Whew. 1, 2, 3. Okay. It took a while for Winters to finally stop running, nearly collapsing onto the ground. Her sides heaved, stitches and pain threatened to topple her over. She was trembling, sweat and goosebumps creating a slick surface on her skin. Spluttering breaths hissing through gritted teeth, but she couldn't focus on any of that. The real world felt fuzzy, disconnected, so far away from her version of reality. Or was it her that was disconnected? How? 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 It is not possible. It cannot be. How? The memory of the weaves was burned into her skull. She closed her eyelids, and they were still there, waiting for her in the darkness. She opened her eyes, blinking rapidly, a foolish, desperate attempt to change what had just happened. To forget? But no. The weaves had been there. You cannot ignore them, Valerie. An echoing voice of a distant memory came to the surface. They will not be ignored. I want to, Dad. I really, really want to. A strange sob rumbled up her throat, stuck somewhere in her windpipe. No, she wasn't going to cry. No. We are weavers. It is not our place to decide what is and what is not. We read the language. We can manipulate it to do certain things. But we do not get to decide what is truth and what is fiction. Do you understand, baby? But Daddy, I know. It is difficult to be a weaver in our society, Valerie. But why? Faintly, she recalled him fidgeting. When you are older, I will give that answer, baby. I promise. Her father had been unable to keep that promise, having died a year later. All her life, Valerie had been expected to stay within certain boundaries. Her mother expected her to remain within her sector of the city at all times, unless she was to be escorted by someone within the family or a trusted mentor. This was for her safety. Okay, I just added the word trusted, but actually I like that better, so I'm just going to add it. I ad-libbed it. Anyway, this was for her safety. Her family expected her to excel in her education and to master her abilities above all else, including making friends or having extracurricular activities. This was for her benefit and for the safety of others around her. Her grandfather expected her to remain silent, to never question the council, and stay in her place. Again, this was for her safety. When it was confirmed she was a weaver, she had been isolated from other children, and even her older sister, for everyone's safety. She had been 3 years old at the time, and had to undergo rigorous training to even be allowed within the same space as her sister, let alone other children of her age. By the time she had been allowed to make friends, she was 11 years old and had no idea how to fit in with her peers. Her father had been unable to keep his promise, but she found out regardless. To be a weaver within the light realms was to be isolated and feared, to constantly push down any questions and stay within a certain box, all in the name of safety. You have to play the game, as her mentor Lucinda told her quietly after she dared to ask questions when she was 12. The council means well, her grandfather always told her anytime she felt a certain way about their society. You do not understand the immense pressures it takes to keep the balance here, Butterfly. What it takes to keep us all safe. One wrong move, and this all goes away. Things may not always be right, but everything that is done is to keep our society safe from outside influences. Earth is a deadly place, filled with beings beyond what you know. There are forces beyond our control, but the light keeps us safe. You cling to that light, Valerie. You cling to it, and you never let it go. Pray for guidance, and it will be shown, Butterfly. I promise. So she had. She prayed day and night, sometimes for several hours when doubt and dissonance clouded her mind. Valerie practiced and learned everything Lucinda taught her and excelled past what even Lucinda had expected of her. She entered into Castor society as her mother wished, the youngest daughter of the then widowed Adele Price Snow, and the sole surviving weaver of the Price family, the only child of Nicholas's to receive the esteemed gift. Everyone had flocked to her, other parents pushing their children to befriend her and make connections. Fake smiles and fake interest, all in the name of making connections. Valerie had told her mother once about the children and how they lied about wanting to be her friend. It was the only time her mother had truly gotten stern with her, saying she just needed to ignore what she saw for the good of the family. Connections like these will get you far in life, sweetie. You are a prize. There will always be people who want to be your friend. Not all friendships are real, but there will be some, her mother had said soothingly, brushing Valerie's long hair back, meeting her daughter's gaze in the mirror. You just need to keep on trying, and remember, making connections is good. It is good for you and for the family. It hadn't sat right with her then, but she had nodded and agreed with her mother. She was young. She didn't know what she was feeling. She needed to trust their guidance. They were the adults. They had lived far longer than she had and knew better. Her grandfather, her mother, her mentor, they all loved her. They would not lead her astray. So, whenever Valerie felt the cloudy dissonance begin to encroach upon her, she prayed or studied even harder, determined not to fall like other weavers had. When doubt started to make her question the world around her, she practiced for hours until it went away. Having to weave her sight was more of a curse than a blessing, because it allowed her to see things. Like the fear that filled Lucinda when she questioned more than she should, or the terror that her grandfather felt when she lost control. The stares of judgment from the other council members, or the magical presence that was all around her. Silent spells cast to watch and wait. And as she learned more when she got older, she realized the spells were there to restrain her should she slip up. By the time she was 14, she had figured out how to disable those spells quietly for small amounts of time, giving her an illicit taste of freedom she had not felt before. And while she was breaking the several rules and restrictions that she had always followed without question, It gave her a sense of relief from the crippling walls that surrounded her. It gave her the strength to keep going, even though she was slowly becoming terrified of her future in a society that placed so many restrictions on her. Excuse me. Perhaps things would have been different had she had more time with her father, the only mentor she had ever had, who had been a weaver and who knew what she was going through. Perhaps it would have been easier if any weaver could have taught her, instead of well-meaning Lucinda and the endless piles of books and lectures. When she had meekly asked Lucinda if she could meet others like her, that question had been ignored, with a familiar cautioning look in her eyes telling her, no more questions. No more questions. No more questions. Stop questioning everything, Valerie. Questions only lead to trouble. She had been told that so many times. And, well, they were right. She had questioned something, and had led down a path that there was no coming back from. She had questions now, an endless amount, and no amount of prayer or studying was going to protect her now. There was no light to beat back the dissonance that plagued her mind, grappling her arms and choking her very soul. There was no harmony here to gently take her hands and protect her until sunrise from her own abilities. Harmony is pleasing perfection, Valerie. It is a nice sensation, like a beautiful vocal melody. Dissonance is grating, like sharp nails scratching at your arms over and over until you bleed. It is discord, and it is greatly feared by many. How do we avoid it, Daddy? We pray, he whispered, staring at his own hands. He could not look his daughter in the eye at that very moment, but she did not know why. We pray and cling to the light. It will not lead us astray. Neither of them had said anything about the negative weaves of self-doubt and half-truths that had danced along his skin. The next day he was deployed to war, and he never returned, leaving behind a family that needed him. Nicholas Price had been survived by his daughters, Cassandra and Valerie. Years later, Valerie Price died in a tragic accident, and the esteemed Price family magic was no more. No one had any way of knowing what truly happened, and that was by Valerie's design, one final act to protect the family. Only Zoe and her champion knew the truth now. She protected them as best she could in the only way she knew how, never seeing the chess moves happening all around her. She'd just been a fly to the spider, walking straight into a trap she thought she had avoided. But, in the end, both Zoe and Valerie Price had gotten what they wanted. Valerie Price had protected her family, and Zoe gained a new champion. For a while, Valerie Price had fought against her new status. Everything had abruptly changed from light to void. Hello, headset. Turning off. How are you today? For a while, Valerie Price had fought against her new status. Everything had abruptly changed, from light to void, from the light realms to earth, from mortal to something not. From having a family to being forgotten, dead and buried. Even her magic had disappeared. It was as if she had been forsaken. No more weaves. No more light. No more harmony. It was just Zoe and the fiends. And she had tried to fight it. Truly she did. But the champion bond was hard to break. And her contract was unique. There was no fighting it. So eventually she just succumbed. Turn it off, champion. It'll be easier. Humanity, emotions, morality. Zoe hated them. They always got in the way. What if it was easier? Valerie Price had thought to herself at the time. What if it stopped the hate, questions, and self-loathing? What if it all stopped? It hadn't quite been an on-off switch, but it was enough. Things grew numb. Her relationship with Zol and the fiends had gotten easier, and everything was just easier. She had become Winters, an invisible woman that no one knew, with emotions as cold as snow. It was just a name to call herself, because she wasn't Valerie anymore. Valerie Price was strong, intelligent, passionate, loyal. She was young and vibrant. She had her own thoughts and was attentive. Winters was none of those things. Winters was a servant for Zol, and whatever Zol needed. Yet as much as she wanted to be 100% numb, it was as much as she wanted to let it all go. Something inside never did. A small string of residual strength flapping in the brisk winter. A small voice pleading with her to fight it. Pleading with her that things didn't have to be this way. It wasn't just black or white, light or void. That she could be herself and a champion. It was just a still, small voice in the back of her mind, and it went almost completely unheard in the noise of everything else. By the time she had listened, it was far too late. Sticky webs of void power, placed with her consent, held her humanity aloft, yet she climbed for it anyway. She tried to dig herself out, but it didn't work. She wasn't strong enough. Not anymore. It wasn't until Chicago that something happened. Something changed. An unexpected hand in an otherwise fruitless battle. 2 men in an alley. A tiger and a coyote. A mistake that led to her salvation. It sounded dramatic, but to her it was everything. She didn't know how, but Cooper biting her was enough to break the web, giving her enough of an opening to break herself free. Everything had come back then, along with the sickening realization of what she had done, and just how far she had gone. No more numbing spider webs. No more chains weighing her down. The switch was gone, destroyed and scattered to the wind. She couldn't turn it off again. She wouldn't. It was a promise she had made to herself, but more than that, it was a promise she made silently to Cooper and Green. It was silly, really, but they had unknowingly set her free, giving her back a part of herself that she thought was long gone. She'd gotten them hurt because of the numbness. She'd crossed a line, and even though she had made sure they got home, she made the promise anyway. It was a reminder of what would happen if she turned her humanity off again. Never again. Hello, phone. Okay. That promise was ringing in her head now, over and over. It was all too much, the memories and emotions. Her world was fragile enough, but her foundations, they were crumbling around her, and she was helpless. She felt it everywhere, the questions, the doubts, fear, despair, dissonance. It was overwhelming her, trying to break through and cloud her mind. It was always there, lingering just behind the void, waiting to strike. She'd felt it since Chicago, when her weaves had come back. The distance was less when the fiends were with her, as if it was hiding from them. Or biding its time. The fiends had pretty much been with her since Chicago, and whenever they were gone, it was only for a brief period. And this one was longer than most. They weren't here to act as a barrier now, and the distance was everywhere. A smoky fog creeped up through the grass, mingling with the muck and moist earth as it soaked into her collapsed legs. Everything was cold. Her brain felt not quite fuzzy, but overstretched and wrung out, dampened down. Everything felt slow, and all the while she was like a sitting duck, waiting for the whispers to grow louder. They always did when the dissonance came. Harmony was quiet most of the time. The only noise it usually made was a singing or a beautiful, angelic melody. Dissonance was whispers. Incessant, awful whispers that made her question everything and anything until it drove her mad. If there was one thing she had learned during her short life, it was that she was never to question anything, whether she was of the light or Zol's plaything. No, stop. Leave me alone, she begged, trying in vain to tune them out. So many voices, and they were just growing stronger. She willed herself to stop trembling under their might. No, no, no. The woman's face, hope and despair etched into her haunted green eyes. The spell, the decaying weaves, Green in his complicated emotions, McCormick in the alley, nature in her anger, Schuyler in the pain etched into his missing poster. Kenley, Parrish, and the mystery attached to her death. Soul, the fiends. One after another, memories flickered behind her closed eyes, the whispers growing louder and louder. Little hooks pricked and pulled at her skin, curious needles tingling her nerves. No, she was stronger than this. No, she had to be. Bright ones, I beg of thee. The old prayer, waving her tongue after so many years. Hear my cries. The whispers grew louder, fingers trembling, but clasped together, head tipping downward in reverence. She felt as she did when she was a young girl, vulnerable and afraid of things beyond her control. Your loyal child is lost. Of course you are, a small voice snickered in her mind. This is foolish. You believe the light would give you grace. You lost, little lamb. My armor is faltering. I fear I may be lost in the darkness. You already are. The whispers were right. Winters knew it, but the words fell from her lips faster and faster, and she all but was back in her childhood bedroom, kneeling before the moonlit windowsill, kneeling and praying until the sun came up with a dry mouth, frazzled mind, and sore knees. Praying day in and day out, but had she received an answer then? She couldn't say. So what makes you think you will get one now, you poor, pathetic fool? You are of the light no longer. It will not answer your insolent pleas. Oh, lights of grace, please hear my faithful prayer. The sob that broke from her felt like a dam shattering behind her clenched eyelids. The whispers never stopped. They only increased as she wept, struggling under their intense onslaught. She didn't know what to do as her mind became filled with only them. The whispers increasing with glee at their conquest. Listen, observe, listen, succumb. No, please stop, leave me alone. Listen, the whispers roared in a horrible melody. No, stop. Kid, you alright? New weaves entered the swirling storm, but the whispers tried still to overpower her, undeterred by the invasion. Scum. Kid. Vaguely, Winters felt herself moving, but not by her own accord. Back and forth, pain sliced up her left-hand side. Someone was shaking her roughly, trying to get her attention. Concern, exhaustion, adrenaline pollution, a heavy herb-like aroma, faltering lungs. The new waves were strange, fleeting, but overpowering at the same time, like a single solid punch that knocked the dissonance back. Oi, wake up. You having a seizure or something? The man grunted, shaking her even harder. The first breath she took shattered the noise that was overwhelming her entirely. A shaky grasp that filled her lungs with warm, humid air. Then she took another and another, over and over, until she remembered how to breathe normally. The shaking stopped, but the man's gravelly tone never did. You're all right, kid. You're all right. Pain zinged up and down in a barely matched tempo to another weird form of pain. Or pressure. One that was going in a rhythm along her back, until she realized it was the man patting her roughly in between her shoulder blades in a steady thump, thump, thump. Just breathe. You'll be right soon. She couldn't find it in her to speak. Fiending off, the dissonance always left her drained. Fiending? Fending! Wow. In her current state, she was surprised she was awake, and despite this man aggravating her injuries, she could not be more grateful to him. What would have happened if I had succumbed? It was a question no one had ever been able to answer, and unfortunately, she wondered if she was going to have to find out that answer sooner rather than ever. The man grunted again, groaning slightly as he adjusted beside her, thumping her back all the same. You good now? She nodded once, taking another deep breath before releasing it and opening her eyes at long last. She had collapsed in the muddy ditch at some point. rolling down the steep incline from the road, it looked like. "Thanks," she croaked, coughing slightly and pulling away from his rough thumbs. "Thank you." "Nah, it's no trouble." She blinked twice, finally looking over at her rescuer. He was an older, scruffy, heavy-set man in overalls with a backwards hat, bad breath, and yellow teeth. He had circles under his eyes, but despite his appearance, she sensed kindness behind those muddy brown orbs. He had stopped when everyone else had driven by, which said something about the man. "You were rolling and shivering up something fierce, kid. You got one of them medical conditions?" She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded once. Yes, sir, Sorry. Thank you for, Weakly, she waved her hand through the air. Her head was starting to clear, but the drowsy euphoria was just beginning to set in. "It's no trouble, kid." The man shuffled again, wincing at the pressure on his knees from being crouched down as he was. He took the cap off his head and began to fiddle with it. "What are you doing out here? You lost or something?" She was silent for a moment, trying to figure out what to say. Was she lost? I was, looking for a place to eat, and then her voice faded as a glimmer of the memories returned. The woman, the ward, and the fear that had filled her. She didn't exactly remember where she had run to, only that she had. How far out of town was she? How close was she to nature's boundary, wherever that may be? The man scratched his skin and grimaced. "Swat, you hitchhiking to Buddy's? You ain't got a car or nothing?" She shook her head, vaguely remembering Buddy's to be a local place to eat. McCormick had recommended it, hadn't he? I'm meeting someone. I am meeting someone. They're at Buddy's. I can make it. It is not far, right? About another 5 miles or so down the road, kid." Miles. That sounded like a long way. She could walk a long way. Maybe. All right. Thank you. That is not far. His responding snort made her wince at the phlegm sound in his throat and chest. "In you condition?" "Nah, kid. You ain't making it that far." He heaved aside and stood up, groaning as he did so. She flinched at the creaking noise in his knees. "Come on. I'll give you a ride." "A ride? In what?" I can..." Her tone was feeble where he was firm. No, kid. You're barely able to sit up as is. Come on." He took her left arm and lifted her up easily, even as every nerve in her body screamed. She made it halfway to her feet before her legs tried to give out on her again, but the man was able to keep her upright. "You sure you don't need a doctor?" "No, I am fine." Doctors meant human medicine, of which she wanted no part of. And doctors also worked at hospitals, which meant cameras and a paper trail. No. 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 "I will be all right soon. She hurried to say, panic pushing back some of the mental fog. You do not have to take me there. I am sure you are busy. Kid, I ain't about to leave you out here shivering up a storm and having one of them seizures. You could die or something." His tone was gruff, but the weaves that flaked off his plaid shirt spoke of great concern and a parental sort of protection. She reminded him of someone, she realized faintly. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? "It's just down the road, and I'm heading that way anyhow. Like I said, it's no trouble." For the second time that day, she found herself silent. She didn't have anything good to say against it, and he was right. She could barely walk. She never would make it on her own. He was very insistent, and if it was truly no trouble for him, like he was saying, then she would be there sooner. She could eat something. Food would surely help with the fog and exhaustion, and then the fiends would be back soon after. It was just 5 miles. She was terrified of human vehicles, but it was just 5 miles, however long those were. It would be faster than walking. She could do it. She could sit, ride in one of those vehicles for that long. She could, right? Besides, it was not as if the man was giving her much of a choice, considering the grip he had on her arm. She would be surprised if it didn't bruise later. With all of this in mind, she relented and wobbled with him to the steep ditch, where he helped her make it up the side of the somewhat busy road. Her nerves clenched at every single whoosh of a vehicle as it passed by, and her heart leapt in her throat the closer they got. Someone did a honk and a vroom. Her heart thudded faster, and she began to wonder if she was going to be able to do this little 5-mile ride. She almost balked when his vehicle came into view, and it was massive. Many wheels that were easily half her height, carrying a long white metal box with writing and numbers on it. The man didn't seem to notice her terror, keeping a steady grip on her arm and tugging her closer to the road. He waited for no vehicles to be coming or going before almost dragging her to the large green metal structure with the doors at the front. If the fiends were there, she would have been begging them to take her to the void. Anywhere but here. I cannot do this. I cannot. By the light, I cannot do this. Stammering, her heart was all but leaping up her throat and out of her dry mouth. The vehicle door was bigger than she was, and there were stairs to get inside. This didn't seem safe in the slightest. Don't worry, I'll help you get up in there, he grunted, opening the door quickly. If he hadn't had a good grip on her arm, she would have stumbled back into the road. The door looked heavy. This vehicle was massive, and all she could picture was one cold metal tomb if she climbed up those steps into the metal structure. No, there is no way. I cannot. But the man ushered her inside. Come on, kid. We ain't got all day now. It's not so bad once you get up it. He let her go and gave her a little nudge, which sent her climbing up the steps, trembling fingers like iron chains on the metal rail bolted to the side. It is just 5 miles. 5 miles. It will be faster in this vehicle than on foot. You would not be able to make it by yourself at this time. 5 miles. 5 miles. It's just 5 miles. The inside was filled with that strong, earthy aroma, which she only now realized must be from the pack of cigarettes sitting on the large plastic structure just under the big glass window on the front. There was a large wheel in front of the other side, and all sorts of buttons, dials, straps, and food wrappers discarded where her feet were. The seat was roughed, but also soft, and worn with age. There was a curtain that hid the rest of the vehicle from sight, just behind the 2 seats. The man clearly spent a lot of time in this vehicle. Kid, you gotta buckle up. His gruff tone interrupted her curious glance, bringing her back to the realization that she was about to be trapped inside of this metal structure. Words failed her, so she just stared down at him, bewildered. Apparently this is going to be a long one. I might split this into 2 parts. I don't know. Let's see here. Where was I? Bewildered. Buckle up? So the man just grunted, heaving a sigh as he climbed halfway up the stairs, yanking one of those straps from her left side and pulling it around her, gesturing that she take the other end, one with a thin metal part. There's a spot on the other side to click into. It's for safety. Come on. She willed her fingers to stop trembling, for her hands to stop shaking, for the fear to go away. She was doing this. There was no other choice now. Nausea climbed up her spine, creeping up her neck to grip her in a dizzy chokehold. She took the other end. Bile rose, acid burning up her esophagus. She pulled the sturdy black strap across her lap. It triggered her gag reflex as she fumbled but found the little slot for the metal bit. Click. She locked her jaw to keep the bile in, swallowing with immense difficulty. 5 miles. 5 miles. 5 miles. The man watched her for a moment, tugging on the strap to make sure it didn't come loose. He grunted once before climbing down and closing the door, trapping her inside with a loud slam. Her eyes slid closed and she focused on breathing. Her lungs expanded, air rushing in. The vehicle rumbled under her, and she hated it. It did not feel like a boat, or a horse, or even a carriage. There was no gentle rocking of water underneath her. Everything stank of the cigarettes, metal, electricity buzzing under her feet, and old weaves and long nights and the toils of labor. 5 miles. The other door opened. The man clambered inside, groaning as he got situated in his seat. I take it you don't like 18-wheelers, huh? She shook her head, reminding herself it was just 5 miles. 5 miles. It was beginning to sound like eternity. He whistled once, the vehicle rumbling and beginning to lurch under her. Her feet pressed to the vibrating floor, every muscle in her body tense and screaming. Pain was a distant memory. Dissonance was all but forgotten. All that there was terror. And 5 miles. 5 miles. 5 miles. Don't worry, they ain't as bad as they look. It's safe. I've been driving one for nearly 20 years now. She kept keeping her eyes closed. She found keeping her eyes closed was even more terrifying than seeing the buttons and the height difference. But only by a little bit. There was a loud clicking noise as they merged onto the road, gaining speed. Her fingers found the rough cloth seat easy to latch onto. 5 miles. The ride was long and silent. Her fingers never loosened and her feet never relaxed. The man didn't say anything, and honestly she preferred it that way. He seemed to be focusing on the road, but his eyes darted over to check on her several times. Once his fingers slipped down something with a mirror from the fabric-covered ceiling, where there was an old wrinkled photo of two small girls grinning widely, wearing goggles with wet hair plastered to their faces. The man never said anything, but his sudden grief was palpable. Okay, sorry for all the interruptions. It's now been a few hours, but I am just gonna get this all done. And we're making bread currently. My mom twisted her knee, so I am not sure if I'm getting any sound from this. Oh wait, yes I am. Yeah, I'm in charge of the timer and getting the bread out. So 8 minutes and then 30 minutes and whatever else, we're gonna get this done. Okay. So the man never said anything, but his sudden grief was palpable. She just focused on breathing, beginning to get lightheaded from the strong aroma that permeated the vehicle, the stench of cigarettes and gasoline. She decided she hated the two together. Cigarettes were one thing, but the gasoline, that was foul. 5 miles. We have to almost be there, surely. 5 miles. 5 miles. Eventually, the loud clicking noise came on again, seemingly summoned by the man, and one of the many dials and levers he was fiddling with. The large vehicle rumbled and lurched to the side, her stomach turning even as she realized with great relief that it was slowing down. By the light, void, demons, devils, gods, Zol. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. With one more staggering lurch, the truck came to a complete halt, but the rumbling never stopped. We're here, kid, he grunted once, rustling for something in his back pocket. She blinked twice, swallowing down bile for the 26th time since she had entered the vehicle. Here. She couldn't see beyond the vehicle or the terrifying road as other smaller vehicles whooshed past. He had pulled off to the side, but he hadn't turned into anywhere. That parking lot's so small, but I reckon you can walk from here. 'Tain't far. She was happy to walk. She was happy to get as far away from this rumbling death trap as she possibly could. It just was going to take her a moment to unclench her numb fingers. Her joints didn't want to let go of the upholstery. While she was working on loosening her grip, the man had exited the vehicle. She didn't pay him much mind, fingers gratefully free and aching. She gripped the strap holding her to the seat, clicking the red button that released the metal end. She was awkward to let it inch back into the... Oh, it was awkward to let it inch back into the vehicle compartment, the final smack of the metal end hitting the plastic wall making her flinch. By the time she had done that, he was already on her side, opening the door to certain freedom. She took his hand and clambered out of the vehicle, shaking. She gulped down 3 breaths of fresh air in rapid succession, each breath rushing from her lungs, doing her wonders. She took a few steps away, jumping only slightly this time when he shut the big door to the vehicle. I am never doing that again. But she was here, and the man had been kind. She waited for him to turn back to face her, something in his hands, but she was more focused on what she had to say. Thank you. Truly, I am grateful that you stopped. And for the, um, ride. She gestured awkwardly at the vehicle. He grunted once, shrugging nonchalantly, but she saw her words meant something to him, and that was enough. He held his hands out, holding two $20 bills for her to take. She shook her head, opening her mouth to say something, but he beat her to it. Take it, kid. Get some food. Go meet your friend. Go home. Wherever that may be. She froze. Home. Wherever that may be. He watched as her eyes became red, but didn't say anything more. He merely took her hand and put the money in her palm, closing her fingers over the bills securely. His grief matched her own. Different notes of different melodies, singing different stories. Two strangers that had met by happenstance, drawn together for reasons she couldn't understand. But one provided a kindness for the other that they didn't know was needed. Don't be lost forever. Someone's missing you. He blinked twice, unshed tears muddling his brown eyes, even as tears fell from hers. She swallowed thickly, taking a deep breath in, then out. In, out. She nodded at him, mouthing thank you, when her voice went silent. Her Crocs squished under the soles of her feet as she began to walk, following a gravel path as she stuck the money into her pocket. Winters didn't look back at the man, knowing she would not be able to see him even as she felt his gaze on her, waiting until she got to the stoop of Buddy's grill. It was only then that she heard the big truck rumble away, taking the man and his grief with it. Buddy's grill was a very large, very busy shack out in the middle of nowhere. A plethora of delicious smells wafted through the glass doors when she opened it, marveling in the simple log cabin theme of the establishment. There were wooden floors, log walls filled with memorabilia being extra loud, making a racket. Oh, wait. Oh. Apparently I skipped like 2 sentences here. Okay. There were wooden floors, log walls filled with memorabilia and rewards, and big fans. And rewards or awards? Awards! I've read this how many times? No! I'm sorry. It is, well, actually really doesn't. I think awards does count, but what I was thinking was, like they're voted like the best grill of 2024, blah 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 blah, that sort of thing. So they were rewarded that, but it is an award. Okay, there we go. With memorabilia and awards, and big fans rotating at a steady pace over her head. Somewhere a machine was being extra loud, making a racket. There was a bustle of voices somewhere in the darkness outside of her vision. But there was also a woman wiping down a counter behind what appeared to be a bar. Welcome to Buddy's. Come on in. Just seat yourself anywhere and someone will be right with you, she called out without looking up. The first seat she saw was at the bar, a simple green leather stool hanging but bolted to the counter. It swung when she sat down, leaving her muddy Crocs hangling hanging in the air. That's my new favorite word, hangling. Hanging in the air. Winters had seen these seats before, but had never used them. They were strange, but oddly exciting. It reminded her of being a small child and getting to dangle her feet from tall ledges. However, it was only when she sat down and relaxed for the first time in however long did she notice that she was exhausted. Between the dissonance and the vehicle death ride, she was pretty much wiped out, at her limits in every way she could be. Get food, she reminded herself. Get food, then the fiends will be back. I can do this. It wasn't like there was much choice, but her turbulent thoughts scattered when the woman brought her a large, thick menu. Hi, what can I get you to drink? We got all kinds of pop, sweet and unsweet tea. Coffee? The woman eyed her new customer. Water is fine, thank you, Winters mumbled in response, noticing a name badge with the name Marianne on the woman's dark blue t-shirt. Marianne nodded and didn't write anything down on her little notepad. All right, I'll give you a few minutes to look over the menu. The waitress left, once again leaving her to the menu and her thoughts. The menu was filled with items, many of which had names or descriptions she didn't recognize. It matched her thoughts, an overwhelming overload of information that only led to insecurities and incessant questions. The weaves, the woman, Kinley Parish, Schuyler, the town, the debt, and now dissonance. She felt it now that she was no longer filled with terror. It was on the edges of her mind, waiting to strike whenever it felt the time was right. The fiends could hopefully keep it at bay when they returned. If they returned. The thought was quietly intrusive, but it was the fear she had been ignoring this entire time, ever since she had talked with McCormick. She didn't have a great sense of time, but it felt like they should have been back by now. They never left their champion for long, so... But it had been a long time, hadn't it? Maybe they wouldn't come back. And if they didn't, what was Winters going to do? She didn't know how to begin to answer that question. If she was back home, she would know what to do. There was always an answer to be had or a resource to use. If she was at full power... But she wasn't. She was at the light no longer. She wasn't home anymore. There was no home for her anymore. No one was waiting for little Valerie Price to show up for dinner or was upset about a missed curfew. Her eyes closed for a moment as the familiar stink of tears burned her eyes. The only people that knew she existed at all, that Valerie Price was in fact alive, were Zoll and the fiends. But Zoll... Well, she wasn't expecting any help from that corner anytime soon. If the fiends didn't come back, she was on her own. The door swung open as she turned the menu page, words with no meaning staring back up at her. Marianne came by to give her the water, but left with no comment. She needed to get a grip. She needed to figure this out. She needed to pick something to eat. The water was cold but refreshing, so she drank half the glass in one sitting. She needed to make a choice. So many options, but so little understanding for any of them. She didn't know what to pick, what to do. She used to think she had all the answers. Valerie Price used to think she could change the world. A wry, tired snort left her lips as she turned another page, eyeing the lunch menu. How many menus did there need to be in this? What was an appetizer? And why were there 2 pages of that? Soups and salads. She knew what a salad was, loosely, but it didn't sound good right now. Nothing really did. She was hungry but nauseous at the same time, too anxious about the paths that lay before her. She needed to make a choice and stick with it. The door dinged again as Winters turned another page, lost in the plethora of uncertain choices before her. People came and went around her, and the door dinged 2 more times. Another page turned. The dinner menu stared up at her in flourishing bold font. She was on her own. The choice was hers. Truly hers. After all this time. Somehow, she knew the fiends weren't coming back right now. She'd wanted space, but not like this. Well, what did you expect? You cannot say you hate them and expect them to help as well, idiot. Frustration oozed from every pore, matching her unease. No, that wasn't quite right. Something wasn't right about this. And what can you do about it? You do not even know how to summon them back. Another page turned. What was chicken fried steak? How do you fry a chicken and a steak together? Steak. That was a particular cut of beef, right? Why did they have different names for the same type of meat? Marianne, I'm here, someone said to her right. She didn't even bother to look. She was their champion, and she didn't even know how to summon the fiends back. She barely knew how to manipulate the void. Zol had never taught her, but the fiends had tried. It hadn't gone over well, even when Winters had been working with them. But she was still their champion. A champion of Zol, and a champion of the void. The void was hers. Even if it wasn't by choice, it was still hers now. It felt fainter than normal, not as oppressive as it normally was. Restrained? Waiting, she realized, feeling around for it slightly, hesitant even in her own mind. It was waiting for her. Your order is almost ready, Aggie. Chef's working on it right now, still. It's been a hectic evening, Marianne interrupted her thoughts, bringing her back to the reality that she still hadn't made a decision. Have you decided what you want? Heat rushed to her cheeks. No, sorry. There is a lot. The menu was 8 pages long, and the pages were bigger than her head. Marianne refilled her empty water glass. Just let me know. Then she addressed someone else. I'll go check on it right now. Marianne disappeared, and Winters turned to another page. Breakfast. Surely there is something here I can recognize. She should just pick something and let Marianne stop hovering. The food didn't matter. It was sustenance. Of all the choices she had to decide what she got for dinner, lunch, appetizer, breakfast, whatever. It didn't matter. You have got to make a decision. She was afraid of making the wrong one. Take your time, Marianne. I'll just rest my feet for a bit. The voice belonged to a plump woman in peripheral vision. Is this seat taken, hon? Startled, Winters looked over and saw the bar stool the woman was gesturing to, 2 seats over on her left. No, she mumbled, going back to the menu in her dreadful indecisiveness. Thanks. The woman heaved a relieved sigh as she sat down, rolling her ankles around. What was Winters going to do? What was she going to eat? Sorry, I had to sneeze. It was the easiest decision, but she couldn't even make that. Eggs. She knew she liked eggs. Just get some eggs and some sort of meat. That will be fine. There. It was decided. There's a lot of menu choices, huh? The woman on her left said. It took her a moment to figure out the woman was talking to her. She just nodded, unsure of what to say. She'd made her decision, and she should have said that, but it didn't feel right. It didn't sound good. The woman hummed, brushing some dirty blonde hair back behind her ears. Yeah, I felt the same way when I first ate here. It's like they think they're a cheesecake factory or something. She laughed, but Winters did not. She had never heard of a cheesecake before. But cheese and cake did not belong together as a word. It sounded disgusting. The woman's laughter faded. Warm chocolate eyes watched her, even as Winters covertly gave the woman a few sideways glances. The woman was older and most certainly human, dressed comfortably in dirt-stained jeans, work boots, and a t-shirt with a few mysterious stains. Long, dirty blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun atop her head. Wrinkles and laugh lines were etched into a freckle-covered face. And as for those eyes... Winters accidentally met them with her own, quickly looking away when the woman gave her a smile that she didn't know how to return. Long day, huh? Winters kept her head bent to the menu, waiting for Marianne to come back. Yes. A few long weeks, really. The woman hummed, drumming her fingers on the countertop. There's nothing worse than a long list of dinner options at the end of a long day. I absolutely hate it. Too many choices when I'm way too frazzled. You know? Winters nodded, understanding the sentiment entirely too well. But if I can butt in and offer a suggestion? The woman waited until Winters looked over to her, unsure of where this was going. I always like to get back to the basics, you know? Start simple. Breakfast for dinner is always comforting and normal. Oh, timer for bread. Speaking of. Be right back. Winters nodded once, biting her lip before speaking. I was thinking eggs. The woman nodded, pressing her lips together. Always a good choice. With some sort of meat. You need some more protein. Winters nodded. And you could always add a side of grits or biscuits and gravy. The woman leaned over as Winters looked over. The woman leaned over as Winters looked over warily. If it were up to me, it would be biscuits and gravy every time. Biscuits and gravy. She knew what the first was, or at least she thought she did. But gravy. Brown dribbles from the bottom of the pan? Or maybe she didn't know. What is biscuits and gravy? The woman dropped her jaw, mouth forming a perfect O. Ah, well, it's only heaven on a plate. Absolutely filled with carbs, of course. But nothing gets you going faster for some warmth and energy, hon. You take a biscuit, and you put some good old white gravy all over it. It's best with some sausage in there, too. Buddy's has some mean biscuits and gravy. Not as good as mine, but it's my second favorite. You should try it at least once in your lifetime. Winters thought about it. It sounded good. Weird, but good. The woman was excited about it. She clearly loved the food. Or perhaps it was cooking, or talking to strangers in a public locale. Her weave spoke of warmth, happiness, contentment, and an inner core strength that Winters would have loved to have even a tenth of. The woman had been through a lot. Life was not always kind, but she chose to see the brighter side of things. That was nice to see, and it spoke of the tenacity of humanity. Alright. I will try some, then. Now. The chuckle that left her sounded weird. Genuine and human. The woman made a little chirping noise. Awesome! I've converted another one! Hey! This time when she laughed, Winters joined in, feeling better from this otherwise absurd, sudden conversational piece. Breakfast was good, but so was trying new food, especially when someone else was so genuinely excited about it. That was a nice feeling. Back to the basics. That was breakfast, all right. But it was also really good advice, and it made her think of a different path she hadn't quite considered yet. Basics. Elementary. Marianne came out holding 5 large bags of steaming hot food for containers. Blah, 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 blah. Steaming hot food containers for the woman who loved biscuits and gravy. Aggie, I am so sorry it was late. You know the dinner rush is a nightmare. Give my love to Eric in your lot. Aggie shook her head and winked at Winters, who smiled softly in return. It's no worries, Marianne. You know me. I'll find ways to entertain myself. Tell Jonathan I said hi, and tell your boys I want to hear about that science report next time I see them, okay? Marianne nodded, then pulled her notepad out and approached Winters. Did you figure out what you want to get? Yes. In more ways than one. Yes. Can I get some eggs? Well, this grandpa's plate looks just fine, actually. With a side of biscuits and gravy, if I can? Aggie beamed over at her as Marianne took down the order. All right, coming right up. And I see you've met Aggie already. The waitress rolled her eyes as Aggie guffawed. Have a good night, Aggie. See you, Marianne. And I was rude and didn't introduce myself properly, did I? I'm Aggie, short for Agatha, but nobody except my mama calls me that. Winters smiled, laughing once. Pleasure to meet you. I am... Winters was on the tip of her tongue, but that name felt wrong to say here. Wrong to share for something that was more meaningful. Winters was Zol's champion, a mindless servant. Winters didn't ask questions. And Winters didn't talk to random people about food. Winters was who got Green and Cooper hurt. She didn't want to be that person anymore. But Valerie Price was dead. The Valerie she had once been was long gone, left behind on an abandoned mountaintop in the light realms, crumpled in a heap at the base of a forgotten altar. There was no light anymore to guide Valerie. But she was still Valerie. Sort of. Wasn't she? She was Valerie Price, but she was also Winters. Two extremes, one of which she could no longer be, and the other she refused to be. So, who was she? More importantly, who did she want to be? Valerie Price? Winters? Or someone in between? Back to the basics. Valerie. I am Valerie. Something clicked into place. This felt right. She didn't know who this Valerie was, but this was the first step. It all began with a choice. And for her, that meant back to the basics. Aggie smiled kindly. It's nice to meet you, Valerie. I hope you enjoy the biscuits and gravy. Aggie left her with a little wave, calling over her shoulder to behind the counter. Have a nice night, y'all. The door dinged as Aggie left, unknowing of the impact she had left on the young woman she had met by happenstance. Aggie had been right about many things. Breakfast for dinner was good. The biscuits and gravy was indeed heaven on a plate, even if heaven didn't really exist, at least that Valerie knew of. It was warm, filling, and settled her in ways she didn't know was possible after everything that had happened. It was simple, but it was now her favorite human dish. She wished she could tell Aggie that. She had a feeling it would make her smile. Eating did make her feel better, and it gave Valerie the strength and much-needed clarity to do what she knew she had to. So she ate and drank as much as she could, leaving more of the eggs on the plate than anything else so she could finish the biscuits and gravy. She was mindful of Aggie's protein comment and dutifully ate some of the meat that had been brought, some sort of ham from the look and taste of it. She gave Marianne a $20 bill and told her to keep the change, leaving the warmth of the restaurant for the cool periwinkle of evening, a new determination in her step. Back to the basics. Gravel crunched under her feet until she left the full parking lot, opting to follow the wind. She needed to find a quiet place, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. No people, no distractions, nothing to be collateral damage if things went wrong, as they usually did. The last time she had done this, she'd had her dad to guide her. But this time, she was on her own. It was a frightening thought, to say the least, but eating had settled her and made her look at things differently. The truck man and Aggie, both of them had said things that made her realize a few things. It made her look inward to things she hadn't wanted to think about before. The void, the light, the council. What if they were wrong? She could admit that. She could. No one was around to tell her what to think or what to do. Not Zol. Not the fiends. Not her grandfather or her tutor or her mother. And work had to be done. Cooper and Green had helped her in Chicago. She could help them now. Don't be lost forever. She had been, until they had freed her. She still was, in a way, but she was closer to finding herself now than she had been before she had met them. The problem was she was still following the light's rules. And really, where had that gotten her? If she had followed those rules in the light realm, it would have been her sister dead instead of her. She was of the light no longer. She had tried to follow Zol's rules, but that had gotten her even more stuck than before. It hadn't worked. So what would? She didn't know. But it was time to find out. Back to the basics. She didn't need to be Valerie Price of the Light. She didn't need to be Winters, Zol's plaything. I am Valerie. And this Valerie, she decided, was going to be different. She didn't care about nature and her vengeance. She didn't care about Zol and her errant moods. What she cared about were the two shifters grieving somewhere in these woods, wrestling with a murder they did not understand. Valerie could help them. She would. And if that meant facing her fears and meeting the void head on, so be it. Phew. That was the end of a very long chapter. I'm definitely going to split this into 2 parts, but that's okay, because that just means that I'll have extra days to relax and get back into the swing of things before school starts on the 21st. So, that means that this part of the video is going to be the 20th question mark, I think so, maybe? I don't know. When is the 21st? Let's take a look at that. But yeah, so... oh, I'm sorry, the 21st is a Tuesday. That's awesome! I thought it was Monday. Cool. But anyway, so... man, I really like this chapter. It's long, but here's the thing, is that I kind of think of that chapter... I actually, I was thinking that chapter 14 was more half of the book, but really, actually, chapter 12 is the turning point. And I kind of forgot about that, so I'm really glad I read this. And I think it's given me a lot of clarity on what I need to do and what mindset she's in, which is why I have been struggling like a mother trucker. Because she's still, scared. She's still doing that. I mean, she's going to be scared, but she's not going to be, stomach quivering and, afraid in that way. She's not that. She's determined more for the first time really since Chicago, actually. But this time it's different because in Chicago, she wasn't Valerie. Literally this entire book up until Aggie, until she gave her name to Aggie, she has not been Valerie. So it's at that point that she really starts becoming Valerie Winters. She doesn't like the name Winters, she doesn't like the connotation, but she still keeps it later on because Kieran knows her as that. And he doesn't think that it's a bad name. So there's a lot of red on her ledger, so she has to carry that, but she's not Valerie Price either. But Valerie Winters is different than Winters. So, yeah, this helped. This helped a ton, which is great. Yeah, so cool. The next chapter is going to be her really sitting down and actually accepting herself, because as I was reading this, I realized she hasn't really accepted that she's a champion, that the void is hers. She says it, but she doesn't mean it. It's not accepted for her, and it needs to be. With it comes strings. She doesn't want the strings, but, I mean, that it is what it is. Something that is to be noted here is that she would not do this for herself. Because in her mind, and with everything she has been taught and shown, giving herself over to the void, even in the way that she has and was forced to, means losing herself completely. Like, turning off the humanity, that's what Zoe wants out of a champion. That's what Zoe's always wanted out of champions. And Valerie's the first one who's blatantly said no. But she does not want to lose herself. So she would never be brave enough to even attempt this. However, for Cooper and Kieran, she would do anything for them because she believes that she owes them that, even if they have no idea of it. And there's also other things going on. So, yeah. I'm going to leave y'all with a nice, lovely little image that I made for Valerie and Kieran, and a song lyric that is connected to them. And that little wonderful golden thread there, I will let you guess if you don't know what that is. But anyway, thank y'all for listening to this little mini series, what have you. And yeah, I have no idea what we're going to be working on next time, but I won't be reading probably. So there's that. Thank y'all so much for listening if you got this far. And I will see whoever I see next time. Bye!